Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Our research-backed videos are engaging, easy to follow, and they help ease the daily challenges like agitation and anxiety so that you can focus on connection and joy. Available by subscription on mobile and TV apps, Zinnia makes every day a little bit easier. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
And welcome to Alzheimer's Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm so excited that you're joining us today. We are going to have a fascinating conversation as usual as we learn from people all around the world at all ages and stages of life. Stay tuned as we shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort.
Here we go. What you think about, you will bring about.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Alzheimer's Speaks. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and today we are going to be talking about Reflekta and their work with lasting legacies through intergenerational storytelling. So I know this is going to be a fascinating show and something we can all participate in. So hang with us. Prior to introducing you to our guest, I just want to say, please go to alzheimersspeaks.com and check out all of our free resources. We've been, building that out since 2009. So there's tons of different types of things you can check out. And also our sister company, which is called dementiamap.com, which is a global resource directory. And if you're not listed in there, you should be. So reach out to me and I can help you do that. Or you can just click on the tab on the front of that site to enter your service, product, or tool as well. So with no further ado, let's introduce you to our guest. Well, Dawn, I'm so excited to have you on the show today. I've looked at what Reflekta does, and I think it'll be really valuable to our audience here on Alzheimer's Speak. So like I said, I'm really excited to have this conversation. But before we get started, if you don't mind introducing yourself, that would be wonderful, and a little bit about your background, because you have a very interesting background as well.
Oh, well, thank you, Lori, and thank you for having me on the show and highlighting Reflekta today. So my name is Dawn Delaloye. I am a grief specialist. I work primarily with people with terminal illnesses, providing emotional and spiritual support. And I have been blessed to be part of the Reflekta team. And what I do for them is I am part of their soul team, which is a pretty cool title. We are able to come alongside people. We do legacy work, do intergenerational storytelling, and give them a safe space to put voice recordings, pictures, and all their memories locked into one place. So I serve with them as kind of a safeguard, making sure that this reflects empathy, it reflects dignity, for the person doing the storytelling and locking in their memories. So we just work with a team of professionals that we're making sure that all of those things are safeguarded and guarded by the family and protected by the family.
Okay, wonderful. Now, one of the things I always ask all my guests is, have you been personally touched by dementia in your own family or circle of friends?
Yes. So actually, my father had Lewy body dementia. So he battled that for several years, and then he passed about 5 years ago.
Okay, great. Thank you. It just gives people a little base, and I think it opens up the door to how many people have been touched by this disease and how a lot of times that experience pushes them forward in doing work maybe in a little different realm than what they would have thought they would be doing. I know I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for my mom, because
Right.
you don't know what you don't know. And once you find the need and see, the effects that it has on family, any type of dementia, it's a life changer for most people. So thanks for sharing that with us. Appreciate that. I wanted to ask you if we can dive a little bit deeper into Reflekta and the storytelling aspect, because I'm a big storyteller. I think it has a huge impact. But how do you think it ties into a person living with dementia and maybe helping them recall memories? Or maybe it doesn't. You tell me.
Well, storytelling, especially if you have those familiar cues, it can really stimulate those cognitive pathways. And I think making it easier for the person with dementia to access and verbalize some of those past memories, even if it's a bit fragmented. People get tied up in, well, that's not exactly how the story was. And that's okay, right? There's bits and pieces of truth in there. And that's what makes a difference. And the whole platform for Reflekta is it's intergenerational storytelling. And that's really what the platform is. It takes about 20 minutes to set up a reflection. And you can do a reflection of yourself, or you can do one of a relative, past or present. It's all of your memories that are being fed in. So you can have pictures, voice recordings, and then stories that go along with that. And then the AI portion is this biographer that comes along and asks the different questions, gives you prompts. So, you might start off with, I'll just use myself as an example. I put in a little bit of information, maybe put in a few videos, do a little voice recording, and a basic timeline. And then it will go through and the biographer will ask me things like, where did you grow up? Were you raised by a mom and dad? Well, what were their names? What were your parents like? Do you have siblings? And then it dives into a little deeper conversation, but it's just those triggers. And even with somebody with dementia, to get their story out there and let them be able to share is huge. And, we're all guilty of this. It's like, we've got pictures. In fact, I just looked through some pictures last week and, I had pictures of my family and I was like, okay, I know that's my mom, but who's with her in this photo? And where were they? Was that a girls' trip to, Vegas? What is this? And so it's just things like that with Reflekta, you get the story behind that photo, right? You get the stories, you get the memories, you get the recipes, all of it.
Well, one of the things you said was, maybe the story's not right, and just accepting, that their memory might be a little bit different. And I know some people really struggle with that. There's right and there's wrong, and I'm going to correct it. And that can really agitate things, and make the person not want to talk. And, we don't correct a little child when they don't get the story right. And a policeman doesn't go after everybody's different story of what happened. They still have to take it all in and be polite and actively listen and things. And I think that active listening part is so important in validating whatever it is they remember. I don't know if you're familiar with a group called Dementia Together, but they train in what they call a speckle program. It's contented dementia. And Cindy Lazinski actually went over to Europe to study with the gal who developed it. But she explains it. And I think this is a good thing to kind of put in perspective when you're struggling, like, that story's not right. I want them to get it right because that's going to make me feel better. But they explain it kind of like a picture book for the brain, where you have, when you're able to collect the data and collect the picture and collect the feelings that go with it, and all of them mesh. So you and I would kind of tell a similar story, pretty close. We might be off a little bit, but it's like, okay, I can live with Dawn's version and she can live with mine type deal. But as the disease progresses, they don't have the data to go with the picture, but they still have the feelings for the event, or what they're seeing. And so, to me, it's really about that comfort within them. And if we can let go of our control and our need to be right and really go with the storytelling process, whatever that might be, because you'll have a chance to tell your story as well, if you're in conversation with them, but to not be argumentative, I guess, which is, again, some people really have to work on that, and some people just can't do it either. But those that step into this go, oh, why didn't I get this sooner? This makes such a huge difference. The other piece that I like about what you're doing is collecting those stories for reminiscing. So even, let's say, once the person passes away, you have kind of that history of what brought them joy. And a lot of times people will reflect later on that this is what really happened, but this is what they said. And now it tugs at their heart, and they wish they could hear their version of the story again.
Exactly. Because like I said, even if it's fragmented or not exactly, it's their version of that story at that time. And even if there's little snippets of truth in there, that's all you need, right? It's like, oh, that's how Dad recalled that at that time. And there's a beautiful gift in that. And you kind of hit on something that, we all have different relationships with people, right? So even though my dad, I might remember my dad differently than my brother did, right? Even though for both of us, he was our father, we may have had a different relationship with him. And so I think that that's the important part too, is when you are creating a reflection for yourself or somebody else, it is your memories. It's what the family is putting in there, or whoever creates the reflection. It's their account of the story. So even if you go to, say, a family barbecue and, you're telling the story of what you recollect that to be, it may be totally different than how your sister recounts that family barbecue, and so it is. And that's what makes it so unique and special, is the owner of that account, the person that establishes that reflection. It's how they see those memories. It's not skewed by outside sources.
I like that, being at a party or an event and having different recollections. I mean, we all have different histories. We have different relationships with people. So we might be triggered by one thing. They might be triggered by another thing, good, bad, or indifferent, that kind of, makes that event solid in their mind, and sometimes I think when the disease hits, we are so worried about maintaining the same storyline. But if you look back in your life, there's going to be a lot of times you disagree, but you didn't take it as seriously because there wasn't a disease and it was just a conversation. And, I think we weigh it out in our brain a little bit differently with that. And now it's triggered as loss and a huge difference. And so I think that that's really important for us to pull out of the picture, because people with dementia will always say, look at me, not my dementia. Don't make everything about the dementia. It's still me. It's still my version. I've always been my version.
Right. I'm so much more than my diagnosis. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Well, we've kind of, touched on emotional benefits, I think, but if you want to dive in a little bit more on that for the person with dementia and their family and friends too, because it's two-sided with this whole thing.
I mean, it really can provide some comfort and a sense of identity, an opportunity to express some feelings. It can reduce some anxiety, when you're sharing some stories, and foster some positive emotions, right? And, like we just hit on, this person is so much more than their diagnosis. And usually, we all want to be seen and heard, right? And to have some value. And when somebody comes up to you and they're just like, tell me your story, tell me about you, their face lights up, right? Like, oh, somebody cares. Somebody is seeing me more than just my diagnosis, more than just a patient. Because let's face it, even, when you're first starting out, and I remember when my dad was first experiencing dementia, he would say to me all the time, he would say, I just want my mind back. I want my mind to be right. They know something's going on with them and it's scary. And for somebody to come up and value them as a person, and they're not just a person going to specialist and trying to get a diagnosis, that, yes, they had this life that, they were a business person, they were a parent, they were a volunteer in their community, all of those things. And, to sit and take time with them gives them some real purpose and value too, I think.
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that is extremely important. How do you think it improves communication? Is it from just the relaxation of being conversational and once you get to that point of pushing the right or wrong aside, is that the comfort point in improving communication, do you think?
I think it creates a shared focus for conversation, bridging some communication gaps. I think it can help caregivers understand a little bit of the patient's perspective and their personal history. And I think, we're all guilty of this. I help caregive for my father. And I think you kind of fall into this role of patient caregiver. And sometimes we forget, oh, yes, this person did accomplish all these things. And sometimes it kind of helps us hit that pause button on, oh, yeah, he's not just my patient, but he's my dad. He was this person that accomplished all these great things. He was a great brother to his brothers. He was a great son to his, mom. And you see them in a different light. I think when you start hearing their stories and some stuff that you don't even know about, right? That you're like, oh, I've never heard that story before. Okay. And again, even if it's a little fragmented, even if it's not perfect, you're getting little nuggets in there, and that's good enough. And I think too, from a caregiver's perspective, oftentimes, I work with the terminally ill and their caregivers all the time. And they always say, the caregivers say, it's like Groundhog Day. It's the same day over and over and over. It's like, here we go again. Get up, get our bath, have our breakfast. And I think having legacy work that you can work on together helps break up the monotony of that day a little bit and kind of give you a project to work on together. And sometimes too, it's like, okay, Dad, you sit here, answer these questions by the biographer. I'm going to be over here, or I'm going to be working on something myself or reading a book or whatever, and kind of overseeing the process. But it gives them a purpose. It gives them something to work on, gives the caregiver a little break along the way too.
When you talked about new stories, and you kind of chuckled, I remember my folks, my dad had brain cancer. My mom had dementia for 30 years. But I remember my dad doing some reminiscing and, with my mom. And all of a sudden this story came out about My dad and my godmother had a contest of who could eat the most chicken wings, and it sounded like it was in some restaurant or bar setting. I had never heard that story because, when I was a child, they probably thought that wasn't appropriate to do. But oh my gosh, they just laughed. They remembered how much fun that was and how crazy it was. And it was like, that was so cool to be able to see some of those hidden pieces that they didn't share because maybe back in the day they didn't feel it was appropriate or whatever. But I really think their personality comes out of what did they value in the moment, even if it's not correct. There's still a storyline to it. Or a time my mom used to say, when she was living in a nursing home, she'd sit with her friends, and every time I would walk in and she'd go, "That's my mother, and she takes such good care of me." And there was kind of one little old biddy that never met with the group. And she would always cackle out, "Dorothy, that's not your mother. That's your daughter." And my mom would go, she'd look at her and she'd kind of wave her hand like that. She'd go, "Oh, I have Alzheimer's." And they would all cackle and laugh. And a little outsider lady, she'd get so mad and red in the face. But it was a healing process. Of course, I wasn't her mother, but somehow during, our caring for one another on her journey, she healed, an abandoned feeling she had with her mom. She didn't feel like she was well cared for. Her mom kind of took off after her dad died. And so some of these beautiful moments can come out that might not make sense, but then we have to look back at the history to piece them together. And all of a sudden you're having these kind of, balloon moments of, wow, how cool is that? Instead of being offended, somebody didn't remember who you were. They valued you at a whole different level of something that's needed to be healed all their life. So there's opportunities like that if we actively listen, with people too, that I think are so beautiful. Now, you had mentioned that, the person with dementia can put all of this stuff in, and, that's kind of one of the primary keys. But if they're not able to, family can put these things in for reminiscing, I'm assuming, as well. Is that correct? I just want to clarify that.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, like, you could sit there, with your loved one and kind of walk them through. You can put the pictures in for them. You can say, "Hey, can we just do a quick voice recording so we have your voice in here as well?" But then you can help them. I mean, so the biographer is going to go through and give you very clear prompts, to get the conversation going. So you, as the caregiver, you don't have to come up with stuff, which is brilliant, because I've heard of people sitting there and they'll do like little journals or something, but it's exhausting, right? They have to come up with all these questions. So with the Reflekta platform, you have this built-in biographer that's asking you all of these questions. And so, you can say to your loved one, "Oh, they're asking you about when you grew up. What was one of your favorite memories?" And then you can share that, and then that's locked in there. The other beautiful thing is you can take breaks at any time. If you need to take a little break and come back to it, it saves your place right where you are. So it's not like you have to sit down all at one time. But really within about 20 minutes, you can have a reflection that's operational at that time, that you've got enough fed into the system. And of course, each time you use it, just like if you use any kind of AI platform, it learns a little bit more, right? Each time you're using it. And so like I created one for my dad. And so I was the one putting in memories and of like what I could recall from childhood and different outings that I went on with my dad. Well, then, it learned over time that I also have 3 boys. So now it will ask me things like, "Oh, you really enjoyed going fishing with your dad when you were young. Do you do that with your boys now?" And it ties it in. And it's like, oh, or we'll ask, I know one time it asked me something like, how are you reflecting or honoring your dad by raising your children? Are you incorporating these things that were so important to him? And it really, makes you reflect on your own life as well, right?
I love that because a lot of times we appreciate this moment, but we don't incorporate it. We don't, we're living so fast paced. We're not consciously living a lot of times. We're just
Right.
kind of putting out fires and getting people to practice and plays and games and getting homework done and meals and showers and all of that kind of stuff. It's just like there's a lot of times we feel like there's just not time to think. Even if we plan a vacation, it's like, okay, it's this beautiful vacation, but do you have some trigger point things that are really important that you want to make sure happen in this destination? A lot of times we don't go there. We just like, okay, we got it up. It's just all going to fall into place, or capture the moments, as they happen. Would be a really cool thing to do. Gosh, I just think this is such a neat program. I have a lot of people in support groups that have loved ones that do like what they call them one-liners, or best phrases. And, to get some of those things down, to be able to ask questions to kind of get some of those responses would be really, really cool too, to find out. When you're recording something, let me ask you this. Can you, say, and Dad, what do you remember? So it kind of jogs the time frame in that reflection for them to respond from.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. So you, can either type or say your responses into the system. And so, yeah, you can pause and say, when it asks you a question, say it asks you about what was your earliest childhood memory or your favorite memory as a child. And then you pause and you can ask your parent that, Dad, do you remember when you lived on the farm? What was one of your favorite chores to do or whatever? What was one of your favorite things that you did with your siblings? So yeah, you can always do that. And that's why I think it's brilliant really to work on it together, because it really does create some of those bonds for you as well.
So if you're doing it alone, could you pose that question? So if they're reviewing it or you're reviewing the reflection with them afterwards, is that something? I'm just thinking sometimes it's nice to be able to hear if it is an audio or a video recording for them to be able to hear or see that from you engaging them to participate, or am I looking at the platform wrong?
So it won't have your recording of the interview. What it is creating a reflection of them, basically. So it's asking the different prompt questions. They're answering those, or you're helping them to answer those. And then, so say, for example, like I created one for my grandmother who has long passed. But I have some of her best recipes in there. And so, at Christmas time, it's like, Grandma, tell us how to make this zucchini bread, give us your recipe. And it will, yes, I loved making this at Christmas time too. This was one of my favorites. Here's how I made it. And then you can say, Grandma, tell us a clean joke while we're making this recipe, and it will pull whatever jokes out there from what you've already put into the system. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. That clarifies it for me on that. I love the preservation of these memories at all. As far as, care partners, husbands, wives, siblings, friends, what are some of the benefits you see for them in engaging in storytelling with their loved one?
Well, it definitely helps strengthen the bond, offering insights into the patient's past. And it can reduce some caregiver stress by providing those meaningful, positive interactions, I think. And I think, like I had said earlier, when you get into that caregiving role, it's so mundane, right? It's so day after day of what we're doing, and you see that person as just the patient, and it's like, oh yeah, that was my mom or my dad, and they've got something to say. They've got some great stories locked in there. And let's face it, our future generations are not going to go over to a shelf and pull out the photo album. Or, now what's even worse, I think, is we all have stuff locked on our phones, right? We've got all those memories locked on our phones. Well, if you don't have access to that phone, when that person's gone, there goes everything just locked in that phone system. So I think it really, having those moments where you can share and asking them in a little bit more detail, and just having that laughter, right? Because sometimes when we're in that caregiving mode, you're so overwhelmed, you're exhausted, you're just doing the best you can, you're trying to keep your head above water. And, sitting and having a moment where you can just start laughing together about something, like, oh my gosh, Dad, I never knew that about Grandma. Like, that's hilarious, and you have those moments. Again, maybe it's not the perfect story. Maybe it's not told perfectly. That's okay. I think getting a break from the day-to-day caregiving, learning a little bit more about your person. And like you shared earlier, sometimes, those stories come out. You're like, oh, I never realized that, or I never heard that. And just with those prompts too, like having some of the photos out and having those conversations like, hey, Dad, it looks like you and your brother were horseback riding. Did you guys own horses at one time? And, even as my dad progressed with his dementia, he could recall things very well from his early childhood. And he could tell you, oh yeah, we did. We had, a farm, and we had 3 horses there, and we'd all go horseback riding after school, or whatever the case may be. But I think it gives them a chance to, like I say, feel valued, and we all want to be seen and heard. And it's like, even if it's just a little break from that patient caregiver relationship, if you can take a moment and do something a little different, I think is always fantastic. And I think it does strengthen those bonds. I know my dad and I would have moments. He was a big country music fan. And so he liked like Kenny Rogers and John Denver and, Oak Ridge Boys and all of them. And so I remember even towards the end, when he had progressed quite a bit, I could turn on that music and he could recall those lyrics. He could sing along to it, or he'd say, oh, I like this song. Like, he remembered that, So I think sometimes having those cues along the way, and you can put that in, right, to your reflection. My dad loved the song by John Denver, and he played it every time we got on the road, or whatever. Those are things that I think are important for yourself. I think it's important for the person, but more so, I think it's important for future generations. I look at my children, and it's like they're going to get to know their grandfather through this, because we do have these stories locked away that we can share with them at any time.
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
Yeah, it really brings the human aspect of us back, and what is at the core of our relationships. I also, I mean, you know, after my dad died, we were gathered around. I have two brothers, and I was saying, oh, I think I'm going to write this book, and I've got all these stories from caring for mom. And I remember my older brother looking at me and going, well, where'd you get all those stories? And I'm like, well, I was there. And all of a sudden, I felt so sad for my brothers that they weren't around, so they didn't have these stories, because those stories just filled my heart so much. And, I could tell there was a little bit of jealousy, in why don't I have those? And it's like, well, you have to show up to gather those, to experience those. And I think that can really ease somebody's pain as they're going through, the loss. And even afterwards, when you mentioned the story of, your dad liking certain songs, that might be something you pick up and decide to have at their funeral or celebration of life, and then share with people. I didn't know this, but this was really important. This was a really important thing to my dad. This was a piece. And those types of things are so cool when you can share legacy, and really get to know your person. I think of, even at my mom's funeral, my mom lived with dementia for 30 years. And so a lot of people knew of her, but they did not know her. But they all left feeling, because we shared legacy moments, I can't tell you how many people came up and go, I feel like I actually have met your mom, and I know her, from all of these things. And so the impact that legacy can have to share and shine a light on a loved one and their personality. We all have like goofy little things that we can chuckle at that, make us, and, or that are just very endearing, or whatever it might be. But those things are important for people to know and to be able to hold on to. And then you've got it in a permanent place where you can go back and reflect, if you need to, if you're feeling down. A lot of times those things can really, I think, fill your heart and your spirit and go, wow, what a connection we have. What a life they've lived. And I've been able to be part of that, I think there's just so many levels to all of the reflective program in terms of how it can be used now and in the future, for people, which is, I think, really important, because nobody wants to be forgotten. And a lot of times, and you probably hear this too, people will say after someone passes, I don't want to forget them. I want to know what their voice sounds like. I want to know their stories. I want to, I want to, and that's helping preserve all of that.
Absolutely. And that is our goal, right? Because that is the number one thing. And working with the terminally ill, that's what they tell me all the time. I don't want to be forgotten. And a lot of those people, and, I work with primarily people that have Lou Gehrig's disease, but, we get some very young people diagnosed. I currently have a gentleman that, he was diagnosed at 30. He has 2 young children. And it's like, I want my children to know about me, or know as I grow, as they grow and into young adults, and have special moments in their lives, right? That I can still be a part of that in some way. That, they can ask me, hey, Dad, what was your wedding day like? Mm-hmm. And in his voice, he can tell them, this is how I was feeling walking down that aisle that day. Or here's who was at our wedding. Here's where the setting was. This is what I thought when I saw your mom walk towards me on that aisle. All of those things. So it's so much more than just an image in an old shoebox. It's that feeling behind it, the essence of that person, the story behind the image. And I think that, it's like we have the technology. Let's use it for some good, to give somebody a voice and to have those memories preserved. And, we do all these amazing legacies and tributes when it's somebody who's famous, and we all deserve that, right? We all deserve to have our story told, and we all deserve to have our memories shared with others. And, we all make an impact on this world. We don't have to be a multimillionaire. We didn't have to win an Oscar or a Grammy. It's, we all bring value to this world. And just creating those legacies, creating those lasting stories for generations to come. I think it's a huge, huge gift, not only to the person that is sharing their story, but it really is a gift for our future generations, because like I say, they're not going to go grab that photo album off the bookshelf and look through it. And, another thing that happens is we all kind of have those storytellers in our family. I know for our family, it's kind of my aunt. And, this has made me really think like, gosh, I have to get some of these stories from my aunt before it's too late. Because, she's in her 80s now. And it's like, once that storyteller of the family is gone, so many stories and memories die off with that person. It stops with them. And then nobody else knows. How often have you gone and said, like, called your relatives and said, hey, do you have grandma's recipe for the chocolate chip cookies? Or who has that picture? Wasn't there a picture of their wedding day? Who has that one? And so it's so nice to have everything just kind of locked in one safe place.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the another way, because sometimes when people know they're passing away, there's messages that they want to have for future events. So it might be a wedding, like I think of Eric Dane from that had ALS, I believe, with Grey's Anatomy, and how his video went viral to his kids of what he wanted them to know. And so I think, we can focus on the past, but we can focus on the present. We can focus on the future with all of this too, in terms of really letting that voice be heard, letting people know their relationships continue. The disease progresses, and to the other side, we can still, we have that opportunity to still communicate and remind people how important they are to us, and give everybody kind of that sense of calm and connectiveness. I think it really increases the whole engagement. And I'm a firm believer. I don't have any statistical proof, but I think my mom lived 30 years with dementia because she was engaged. She was people listened to her. She participated. And, when you have that, you have purpose. And we all want purpose. We all want to be understood. We all want to be validated and heard. And that doesn't change because somebody has a disease. I don't care what it is. It doesn't change. That's just I think a natural human need that we all have. And this is a nice way to help people, because so often people don't know what to say or what to do when they come and visit. I think of my daughter would go visit my mom, and she would always bring fingernail polish so she could do her nails. I would always bring a little bottle of lotion. But my brothers would come and they were like, what do we do? What do we do? I mean, they were just lost on how to engage with my mom because they didn't really want to process their feelings. So they kind of got, and that's my observation. So they kind of got stuck, in this really uncomfortable state. So like for them, we got a CD player where they could push mom's music. But I just think how cool it would have been if we would have had Reflekta at that time for them to engage and then capture some of those stories that they missed and didn't know, and try to shift them out of that kind of fear factor and uncomfortable setting to getting back to the core of their relationships again.
Right, exactly. Yes, it does, because on both sides, right, it triggers those memories. And I think, like you hit on earlier, you were the person that was there with your mom, and you got to experience a different side of mom, right? And that was the same for me with my dad and my brother and I. I was there with my dad through so much of it and so much of the caregiving process. And even though my dad was changing, there were still so many great moments and still so many things that he shared with me. And it may be for only 5 minutes and then he'd be somewhere else. And that's okay, though. I was always like, wow, that was a cool 5 minutes. I'm so glad I found that out about my dad, or he shared that with me. Yes, so meaningful. Absolutely.
Well, and I found, like, with my parents, and I think part of it comes with age. I'll be 67 in a couple of months, and I think I'm more relaxed in living life. But I saw a whole different level of playfulness with my mom. My mom was kind of a taskmaster and, managed many different things. And she always had fun doing them, but it was just a whole different level of comfort and relaxation with that fun. And I think through me experiencing her changes, that had a big impact, I think, on me as well. That, you're not all that important. Put your phone down, turn it off. The world will still spin, it's not going to explode. And just be in the moment. And that was probably one of the biggest gifts her disease and she gave me, through this whole thing, was to really, okay, let's put this in perspective. We still have a relationship here that hasn't gone. It's changed.
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
But our relationship changed throughout my life. Everybody's relationship does. But yet again, we get in this spot where we don't want it to change because we're scared of the changes, instead of just going on this detour and adapting and making the best of it. And, like you said, some of those memories are they're so heartfelt. I mean, you can't replace them, and you would have missed them if you denied that.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And yeah, you just hit on so many different things, but it's so important to be present. And I hear people say that even with a horrific diagnosis like ALS, I was recently talking to somebody and she said, in a very strange way, this diagnosis has been a gift for me because I was always such a busy person and a taskmaster and go, 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 go. And she said, this has really caused me to slow down. It's really caused me to live in the present, because we're all guilty of that, right? We are, as human beings, we live for the future. It's like, when I get that new house, when I get married, when I go on vacation, you're always looking at the future. And very few of us are able to live in the moment and just be like, let's just take today for what it is. Let's sit in the moment. Let's hit the pause button and just sit in today for a moment. And Yeah, that can be a beautiful gift though, especially when you're with your loved one like that and you just take a day and just sit with them and let, no judgment, no, trying to get them back on track, just whatever comes, and just sitting with them in those moments and being appreciative that they're here and you're able to care for them or visit them to whatever capacity you can.
Well, and sometimes those moments don't have to be filled with a specific thing to do. I think it teaches us that we can sit silently and just be grateful for being in someone else's presence and to feel their calm and what that does to us, because our energies all feed off one another as well. And so when they're, and then when they're reflecting on something that brings them joy or sadness, we're going to feel that too. But again, it ties us closer to them and who they are and what affected them in life. What was most meaningful. I just think it's a very cool process. Have there been any studies that you're aware of in terms of storytelling enhancing, cognitive function at all?
Yeah, so there are quite a few studies out there that look at storytelling and how that impacts someone with dementia. But yeah, actively participating in recalling and narrating stories can really exercise various cognitive skills like obviously your memory, the language processing, sequential thinking, and potentially slowing decline. I mean, that's always a hard thing to register, but there are studies on that. And, now it's refreshing to see, even like with music therapy. I mean, most hospices anymore offer a music therapy because they're realizing, music is a huge part of that. Yes, the person might not recall your name, but they might remember those lyrics from, 1964, so it's all of that, I think. And I think the more that you can do to get them engaged, and if they get irritated or don't want to talk, okay, that's fine. Let's just sit in this moment together. But sparking something and most of the time, and it depends where they are in their disease progression, but having a moment to tell their story and again, with the prompts are really helpful because it's like, okay, tell me where you went to middle school. Okay. So somebody like in the earlier stages of dementia, that's really working their brain, right? Like, oh yes, I went to Chapman Middle School. Okay. And who was your best friend? Do you remember your best friend in high school? Oh yes, my best friend's name was Shelley, and it's all of those things. Tell me a little bit about Shelley. Well, then they can usually run to the races with that one. They can give you all kinds of details. And so I think it really is helpful. And yes, there's lots of stories on how storytelling is impactful for our dementia community. And I think we'll start seeing more and more of that come out. And like I say, I'm really thrilled to see things in hospice like the music therapy, because I think it keeps the person engaged. And you said something earlier about your mom living with dementia for so long. And I think when somebody is a little bit more engaged throughout their diagnosis, I think it does do something to slow the progression. I really, truly do. It makes a difference.
Yeah, there was a study the other day, and I didn't write it down. I was like, dang it. But it actually talked about social engagement, and now they're really seeing how that helps. And I've been screaming that from the mountaintops, forever, where everything's been more lifestyle based. Then a few years ago, it's like, oh, sleep's important too, and that was like sleep. No one ever thought of sleep before, And so it's kind of interesting how it's all coming about, and it's not just one factor or another, and how important it can be. The other thing that I like with Reflekta too is this can work for an extrovert or an introvert because it can be so personal. I think that's cool. And when you were talking about, middle school and mentioning a friend and tell me about, I mean, you're going to get a sense of what was important to them in their people in their life, and, what were their best moments, or, what was the scariest thing you guys ever experienced? I mean, everyone usually has a happy moment, a scary moment, a sad moment in there, but it'll show you kind of values and morals and ethics and just the things that friendships go through, some of the twists and turns in life, and having those prompts really does ease, well, what do I ask next? Because it takes it out of being so task oriented and what I think a lot of people feel as a burden on them to keep the conversation going. And so that I think can just be a huge relief. And then it turns more into, I don't want to say a game, but I almost feel like that they're like, okay, I don't have to be responsible. These are just kind of the rules, and these are the things that'll help me along. And then, from there, then they're able to relax and then really step in, I think, to the moment once they kind of get through that initial, how's this going to work type deal.
Yes. Yeah. And it is. It's very easy to set up, like I say, in about 20 minutes. And the questions are very thought-provoking, but it's very clear prompts along the way too. I would say the other thing that I experienced going through this as a caregiver and a daughter was, I had a hard time, like, I had mentioned earlier about the music, like I had a hard time listening to any genre that, my dad liked. And for a couple of years, it was hard to hear those musicians. And I think after time and going through this process, so I created my reflection on my dad after he had passed. So I'm putting all these memories in. And what I noticed for me is instead of viewing my dad as a frail man with dementia, I started thinking back on my childhood and the best parts of my dad. And when he was lively and funny and in his full body and active, that's what I'm able to recall now. So that's how it helped me personally kind of get through that. And I will tell you, right after I created my reflection of my dad, that next week, I put John Denver on the stereo as I was driving around town. And I was like, okay, and so that to me was huge, because I think, especially when we're caregiving for somebody, especially for years, it's hard to get that image out of our head of this frail person or this person that couldn't recall our names or do much for themselves. And I think there is some healing in going through and recalling how they were when they were younger, how they raised you, where they worked, their friends, their family. And you realize, oh my gosh, yeah, they were so much more than their disease, and they lived this whole big life before their diagnosis. And that's worth paying attention to for sure.
Yeah, I think after a lot of times someone dies, we kind of loop that loss, and to me, that's the whole grieving process, and some loop longer than others. And then you got to that point of, well, now I can celebrate the man I loved because I've kind of processed a lot of that. And now I'm to the good side, in terms of the remembrance, because and again, I know for me, that's how it was. Even when I was with my dad and he passed right with me and I felt his energy go up my arm and the whole 9 yards, I looped that over and over and over and over and over and over and over. I mean, I couldn't get that out of my head. And then once I got over that, then I could see the whole man and the whole presence and the whole effect of my life. But it was just, such a great loss, when you lose somebody like that. I mean, it's a hard thing to process, but when you can kind of get to the other side and feel comfort and gratitude for being part of their life and to celebrate them, that's a really cool thing to be able
right.
to.
Great place to be when you can look back with more laughter than tears, right?
Mm-hmm.
And joy when you think about them instead of sadness. Absolutely.
Exactly. Well, this has been, such a great conversation. Dawn, I really appreciate you coming and talking about Reflekta. Now, the website is reflekta.ai. They are also on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and we'll have all that information for you as well. Any last tip or comment that you want to make before we wrap up?
I would just say start those stories now. Your loved ones want to hear them, and you deserve it, and your loved ones deserve it. So go ahead and start a story today.
Okay. Is this on the computer? Can they download it on their phone? How does that work?
Yeah, so you can do it from your phone. You can do it from your computer. You have full control over it. We do not scrub any information off the internet. So if I, for example, put in your name and I put in Lori, it's not going to pull off information that's already out there about you. It's just putting in what I'm going to put in about you. So it's totally locked in by whoever is doing the reflection, and whatever they're feeding the biographer, that's what's in the system. So it's not scrubbing off the internet. It's not taking information off your Facebook page or LinkedIn or wherever. It's only the memories that you're putting in of your loved one or yourself.
And that information is private just to you?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Because I know people are worried about that. Are my stories all of a sudden going to be,
Right.
all over the place, and what happens with all of that? So yeah, good to know. Well, thank you, Dawn, so much for taking this time with us today and sharing what Reflekta does and all the benefits that it has for not only, your people with dementia, but all your caregivers. And again, anybody can do this. So you can have kids participating in this as well. It doesn't have to just be one person feeling the benefits of all this, which is really cool. So I always ask our audience to be a giver of hope, like, click, and share. There's always somebody in your sphere that you might not even be aware of that needs this information. And it's scary to reach out and hear or read or purchase something because, you don't know what you don't know. And so getting it from a trusted source can make such a difference in so many people's lives. And it doesn't cost you anything, and it takes very little time to just click and share. So we really appreciate our community getting the word out there for us. And then last, I just want to give a shout out to my webmaster. I love them dearly, Q for Good. If you're looking for somebody who is easy to work with, reasonably priced, meets their deadlines, and lets you sleep through the night because they're handling the black hole and the blue screen and all that kind of stuff, I would highly recommend that you check them out. They are wonderful. And if you mention my name or Alzheimer's Speaks, I believe they're still doing a 10% discount for you as well, but they'll do a free consultation. So anything to reduce the stress, I'm up for that. So until next time, we will see you later. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
It's time to rethink, renew, and reimagine retirement. Hey, everybody. Jared Sebeste here, host of Retire Repurposed. Now, this podcast is about the non-financial parts of retirement, which many times can be even more challenging than the financial. We believe retirement is not the end, rather the beginning of what could be the most impactful, purposeful, and fulfilling season of a person's life. So don't retire. Become repurposed. To listen now, search Retire Repurposed on your favorite podcast platform, Senior Resource, or Life Audio.